In our next lesson, we're going to be covering adding and subtracting rational expressions. So in today for day one, we're just going to be adding and subtracting rational expressions with like denominators, and then talking about how to find the LCD, the least common denominator. So we're going to be using the note sheet for lesson 29-2, something to write with, and maybe a calculator if you need it. Okay, so adding and subtracting rational expressions is very similar to adding and subtracting fractions. In order to subtract or add fractions, we must first get a least common denominator, okay, an LCD. So let's just write on here, common denominator. Okay, so you must have a common denominator before you can add any type of fraction. So these algebraic fractions are included in that. Okay, so our first couple of examples was when we're already going to have a common denominator. So in this example A here, if we look at our denominators, they're both x plus y. So in that sense, if we already have a common denominator, okay, all you have to do is just add your numerators across. Okay, so 2x plus 2y. Since those aren't like terms, we can't really do anything with them. All we really do is write it as 2x plus 2y. Now, this particular example, we could pull out a 2 from each term, let us with 2 times x plus y. So then we did have a little simplifying. Now, that won't always happen where you can simplify something, but it's good to always kind of check it out and see if you can. So let's look at example A here. In example A, I have 3x over x plus 2. We're going to add that to 6 over x plus 2. Now again, if we look at this problem, our denominators are already the same. So I don't have to worry about doing anything with the denominator. I'm just going to rewrite it down here as x plus 2. So then all I have to do is worry about adding. This is an addition problem, so adding my numerators across. So if we have 3x plus 6. Okay. Now again, 3x and 6 are not like terms, so we can't necessarily do anything with combining them, but I'm just going to check real quick to see if there's anything I can simplify. So that would mean we'd have to factor either the top or the bottom. Now the bottom's just an x plus 2, but let's think about the numerator. They have a common factor there, 3x and 6, has a GCF. That GCF is a 3, so if I take that 3 out, I'd be left with x plus 2. Okay. So then that's going to leave us with 3 over x plus 2. I have another x plus 2 on the bottom. So in this part, it was actually beneficial for us to simplify the numerator because now these x plus 2's can simplify out, leaving me with my final answer of 3. Okay. All right, I'm going to have you guys maybe start B, and then we'll talk about if we can simplify it at the end. But again, your denominator is already the same. We don't have to worry about finding a common denominator, x squared minus 9. So all you have to do is subtract your numerators. So take x minus 1 and subtract 2. And what do you get for the numerator there? Okay. Well, x minus 1 minus 2 would be x minus 3. Now, if we compare that to our denominator really quick, is there anything we can factor to simplify this? Well, hopefully we should know that this is a difference of squares on the bottom. Would factor as x plus 3 and x minus 3. So in fact, we do have some simplifying going on. These x minus 3's can cancel. So remember, when there's nothing left on top, we would just put a 1 there. And the only thing we'd have left on bottom is x plus 3. So that would be our final answer. Okay. So when you do your adding and subtracting, just double check it, make sure, is there anything that can still factor? Because if there is and something we can cross off and simplify, then I would just check that first. Okay. All right, the last thing we're going to do today is just talking about what happens when we do not have a common denominator. So like in this example, our two denominators are much different. We have a trinomial and a difference of squares. So as this problem was now, we would not be able to add or subtract those fractions because they don't have a common denominator. So here are the steps to do when you need to find the LCD, the least common denominator. Okay, so step 1 is to factor each denominator. So you would factor this trinomial by making the x. See how they have it factored right here? And then we would factor our other denominator, that difference of squares, x plus 4, x minus 4. So that's step 1, factor each denominator. Now, if you can't factor it, then you would skip that step, but most of the time you'll have something to factor. Okay, then we have step 2. You're going to identify anything that they already have in common. So in this factored expression, you could see they already have x minus 4. That didn't work out very nice. It turned it black. Let me just erase this really quick. Okay, they already have x minus 4 in common. So you would include that in your LCD. And then you would look at factors that are not in common. So what else is in this that's not in common? Will be x plus 1 and x plus 4. So those are not in common. So the only thing you have to do to find the LCD then is just to put all of those factors together. So it's actually not too bad. Once it's factored, again, you look at what's in common, then you look at what's not in common. Your LCD is all those factors put together. And we don't multiply them out. We just leave them in a nice factored form like that. But let me go through one with you, and then that'll be it for today. So we have to, step 1 says to factor each denominator. So the left denominator is x squared minus 6x. So the only thing I notice there I can do is take out an x from each term. That would leave you with x minus 6 left over. Okay, denominator 2 is a trinomial, so I'd make the x. Factors of negative 18 that add to negative 3. That'd be what? Negative 6 and positive 3. So this denominator factors as x minus 6, x plus 3. Okay, so here's how we find the LCD. We start by looking at what factors does it already have in common. Well, we already have an x minus 6 in common in both factors. So that will be in our LCD, x minus 6. And then we do what factors do they not have in common? Well, one has an x and the other doesn't. One has an x plus 3 that the other doesn't. So we would include that. So x and x plus 3. Okay. Now you can write this LCD in any order. Just as long as you have all the factors there, you should be good. But to find the least common denominator, you factor each denominator. Look at what they have in common already and list that out first. And then list what they don't have in common. So we didn't have an x in common or an x plus 3 in common. So we include that. So that is our final answer. Okay. So in our tomorrow's lesson, we're going to be going over how to actually add and subtract with an unlike denominator, but we will practice doing this more in class, okay, together.